Hi, I'm Aegis Cores, and welcome to another episode of EU5. I'm starting a new series or a new video. I think this is just going to be a one-time video where I'm playing in the nation of Ormus. Apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. They start with a few provinces there in the Persian Gulf region, or the Persia region. My intention for this video was to expand and form Prussia. There's a number of nations that are similar culture to me, the Farsi. There's also a lot of hordes in the area, right? Remnants of the Mongolian Empire, and at the start of the campaign, their armies are a lot stronger. But then once you start to get to like the Second Age, where you can have more powerful armies, you do start to overpower them. I don't really run up against like the Mamluks or the Ottomans in this particular campaign. That runs from about the 1330s to the late 16th century, in like the 1580s or so. You start off with a couple of territories that are disconnected from your region, so I just kind of make those into vassals with the intention to like feed them the rest of the province down the line. And then you also have a nation that Jarawanids, I should say, is a tributary of you, but they're highly disloyal. So you can try to improve your opinion of them from the start of the campaign, but I feel like they revolt against you into a war on the number of playthroughs I did for this, right? So it's probably best to just let them revolt and then attack them. And you can gain allies with Kerman and Ingewood's. I believe that's how you say it. And if I picture any of these, I apologize in advance. I'm no means an expert of it, but the green country and then the white country that kind of borders you, right? The Ingewood's and the Kermans will be willing to ally you from the get-go. So my suggestion is to at least ally them immediately. You can always kind of break those alliances down the line. In this campaign, I kept with the Ingewood's longer. The Kerman, I think I attacked one of their allies down the line. You need all of that territory really to form Persia, and the territory in Persia is not exactly that valuable. I hope down the line they add some sort of buff similar to what they did with Austria, right? Because there's a lot of mountains, there's a lot of impassable terrain in this region and in the Crescent as well. So even if you moved your capital to like Baghdad as an example, the hordes have that at the start of the campaign, but it's still has a lot of impassable terrain, so everything it really is valued on control from setting it up from the campaign. And because of all of this territory, you also don't have a lot of food provinces. So any food provinces that you do have, rice or grain, I would recommend. There you go. You see a war is declared almost immediately. But I had my allies, and they come in and call to arms. Any kind of rice and wheat provinces, my suggestion is to just boost those. Don't create them in towns, and allow them to grow, because you're going to be in desperate need of food with all of the desert terrains. So the allies come in. With the two of us combined, we're able to kind of take them on. If you try to take them solo, they have more forces than you. But between myself and my allies, and just kind of allow them to attach to my armies, I can kind of siege things down and then turn those into several different vassals. Just gets more out of the lane. A tributary just kind of sends you tributes, but it's not something. It's not as easy to annex as like a vassal, so to speak. So, my suggestion is siege everything down. They have that one fort, but everything else can kind of get sieged down. And then you have that territory for yourself, right? You're just hoping that none of your allies take the land for themselves, and then I'm able to kind of annex it all. With the intention to not only own Persia, but own the entire Persian Gulf over there. Ormus is the capital, which is a good province. As you can see, I kind of go to war with one of my neighbors almost immediately following that. It's a good capital, but it's disconnected. You can't build a bridge to the mainland, so you do get early game some value from trade because it kind of owns and dominates the sound tolls, right? Like it coming in, all of the countries that utilize trade within this region have to utilize the sound tolls and pay you. So you can make early game pretty good money. I went admin there, right, for the proximity speed. And then Yaz had no allies. It was a simple war. Allows me to kind of connect land to my vassals. And then immediately go to war with Oman, and then I kind of get that entire region. I don't intend to kind of go towards the Horn, Yemen, just because I'm not going to barely be able to do much with that land anyway. I also didn't want to kind of start to piss off the Mamluks down the line if they start to expand southward. But those two wars will quickly expand. There's not really much of a coalition. One thing I've noted, I do have quite a bit of over diplomatic capacity, and that's because I haven't been able to expand to a duchy. It takes well over like 80 years for me to become a duchy, just because I need the 25 prestige, and it's not an easy thing. If you're annexing an entire nation, you can't do the humiliation wars. So you need to kind of have a big war with a lot of countries and utilize the humiliation CB in order to get to that like 25% once you hit all of the requirements to become a duchy. And that'll give you a little bit more diplomatic capacity. But I didn't do that. I'm still kind of learning the new like 1.14 patch, the Rosbach patch that's in beta. But as you can kind of see, I start to expand outward, right? Start to take land by land, taking land a little bit of a time with the neighboring countries, trying not to allow a coalition to form. You do start off with a vassal from the get-go that as you move and improve in opinion, it's recommended to at least annex them first, as it's right into the land that you have. And then Injuids, who's still my ally, I already broke it with Kerman. I kept the alliance with Injuids, caused me into a war with a lot of the provinces that I want. So when this happens, it's really just more about getting to the land and sieging it yourself so that they're not taking the land. Otherwise, at the end of the day, you're going to have to fight them for that land down the line when you break that alliance. So you can block them from taking land if you can kind of get to the provinces sooner, so allow them to kind of fight those enemies, and you break up my levies to siege as much of that land as possible, right? Because all of it is valuable rightful Persian clay, I should say. So it doesn't have a fort or anything like that, right? So as long as you have enough troops to siege down an empty province without a fort, it's a simple enough war. I think they do get a couple of the lands, but as long as you control the lands that borders their country, they won't even take that land themselves. And they do give me some of the provinces at the conclusion of this war anyway. So it's not a total loss, right? And it kind of weakens those countries for the next set of expansion. As I said before, you have to still kind of integrate these lands, which my my cabinet basically is doing that for almost the entirety of this game. As you're looking to kind of expand as quickly as possible, right? The goal of this wasn't to, and here I'm in a rebellion war. I think some of the nations join this one too, right? A lot of times in rebellions, if they have it as provinces of interest, they might join as well. So it does sometimes leave areas of opportunity to grab some free clay if they join the war, right? Versus having to waste a casus belli or a parliament action. I've also been trying to convert some of the territory towards my culture, which makes them disloyal, right? As you can see, it was a red heart, now it's a yellow heart. So some of the land, they don't have my religion. They might be Shiite versus Sunni, and then convert them to Farsi, which is my dominant culture. Just allows you to kind of increase. And that blue nation right there, I think I clicked the wrong button and gave them independence. So I'll have to retake that land down the line just so that I can have a foothold all around the Persian Gulf, but also the intention to be able to connect my land without having to ferry troops over with ships, which I have to do now. It's quite annoying, and I'm not at a position economically to build ships. But still looking to kind of expand. But when you have disloyal armies, it can be somewhat tricky because the nations will start to guarantee those, which will block you from wars, right? Because until you can kind of get opinion up of your vassals, and through diplomatic capacity and an improving mechanics, they'll actually join the war against you. So you kind of have to break that coalition that forms against you when you have disloyal vassals. So use it wisely, especially if you're expanding and have potential coalitions joining anyway. It just like your own vassals that you already expanded into can kind of be used against you in those wars. Right here, I'm in another war with Macron, and Kerman joined as well. So it's just continuing to take 2 provinces at a time, not to take too many non-co-belligerent lands. Luckily, Kerman's kind of isolated, right? The lands that are immediately border them to the left are impenetrable mountains in the Persian area, which is good for me. Like, it's kind of like a barrier, but it's bad for expanding your like proximity to your capital. And again, with my capital being an island and you can't build a bridge, you can't really expand your proximity beyond your capital too easily. Even if you build roads, like until you can kind of build the governor, and it doesn't make sense in the land and territory that I have now to build a governor because I'm not really far away. It makes sense to eventually move your capital away from there. I end up moving it down the line to Shiraz once I kind of start to gain some of the territory from the Injuids. It just has a little bit more valuable territory surrounding the capital than Hormuz. But I am at a point where Hormuz doesn't lose too much control because it's a city from the start of the campaign. And then when you start to build like things like pound lock canals and temples and all the other kind of buildings that give you a little bit more control, provincial control, crown power, or things like that, and Hormuz, you maintain that power. So you still maintain that trade income that it brings to the table, with the ability to kind of create better surrounding territories in the immediate vicinity of your capital, right? Whereas Hormuz is a valuable city, but it's a pretty crappy capital based on the dynamics, and hopefully that changes down the line, right? Where you can kind of exude more naval control, and you would be able to do that once you kind of move towards a naval, down the line from like a country perspective. But at the beginning of the campaign, it's less valuable. I continued my expansion, towards India, right? But trying to maintain all of the provinces within the Persia region in order to, you need about 240 or so territories to form Persia, and I'm well off of that as we, gear into the 1400s. It has been somewhat slow playing, mainly because of the coalitions that kind of formed against me and guaranteeing my vassals, but I've improved enough opinion from them so that I could start integrating all of those territories and continue my expansion into Persia. It's easy enough wars. You kind of pick and choose. Find the right opportunities. Try to isolate the enemy so that they can kind of consolidate. So if you can quickly wipe with you and your vassals a lot of these territories, you can easily win most of these wars. In addition, you're a little bit closer to Europe with your market access, so you can kind of get the newer tech sooner than some of these landlocked Persian nations as well. So utilize everything to your advantage, especially with weaker territories, with weaker hordes. Once you start having stronger armies with the army tech, and just kind of siege things down, take things slow, not try to overextend yourself, not to try to win everything from like a battle perspective, but ultimately looking to see if you can take on all of these nations, because you do need to kind of capture all of that clay. So really it's just more about finishing off the remainder of this war as best you can to, establish a stronger foothold into more of the landlocked regions of Persia, right? There's a number of these nations, so taking a little bit here and there from each of them, making sure that they're not sieging things down behind you. It's like, and they also don't want to make sure you isolate some of your territories there, right? I think I had a smaller stack trying to unsiege things down, allowing them to kind of siege down that fort, which will take some time, and then just kind of finding those opportunities to wipe my enemies, right? This one's a more difficult war as, I started to lose some of my levels. I think I actually lost that battle. So I knew it was about time to piece out some of their allies. Now that they have less armies, it becomes a little bit easier. So utilize that to your advantage. Sometimes when you're in war long enough, you siege down enough of the enemy territories, they're willing to kind of just take a simple peace deal without land and get out of it. So even when you're outnumbered, you can still kind of come out ahead if you're patient enough with how do you go to war. So to continue to push those borders kind of up against that impassable terrain, so not looking to kind of expand further inland there, just because it would be pretty invaluable clay for me, in that it had like zero control, and the logistics of going through the desert and mountains doesn't make too much economic sense, right? It would just basically feed in money to my estates, which is counter to what you're trying to do, right? You want to have most of the income coming to the crown. So understanding like what the value benefit of adding clay is when looking to move wide versus playing tall. As you can see here, 1417 finally became a duchy. Finally had the prestige from that last war where I was taking humiliation CBs and things like that. And I had finally over 25% prestige. As you see, Kerman's the only one willing to join a coalition. But that helps me with a lot of my diplomatic capacity now that I was able to move that. So another war here with Makran. I think I just kind of YP'd or took war reps and cash from them out of the previous war, with the intention to kind of annex them here, right? So there's 3 nations that are here. There's 3 nations that have clearly that I'm looking. You kind of kick the can down the road to an area where you're going to be a little bit more powerful. Ferry all my troops, consolidate them, and just take it country to country, right? Like take out Kerman first, siege them down so that they can't continuously respawn 300 troops that'll unsiege land that you already sieged. In an ideal world, right? They're kind of running away from my territories right here in this battle. But you can kind of siege those down, take on some of those smaller stacks, wipe them out, and continuous to make sure that your morale's up too, right? I was like lower there. I have 2,000 versus 1,300, but with the 2 of us combined, we can kind of wipe out the forces that they're kind of consolidating now, with the intention to win these battles, right? And once you kind of win that first one, they're in trouble right now. I had the numbers, and after I win that first battle, they retreat towards separate, likely to their home countries, and then you can kind of quickly siege down right there. All of Kerman just went, and then there's a lot of forts up here in the mountains, which is tricky here because mountain forts, you take a ton of attritions, which will just completely destroy your levies, and you can't move for like 4 months out of the year, especially if it's like a harsh winter month. So a lot of times it's like picking your battles, picking is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak, right? So just kind of piece them out and get the Makran territories, because I have intention to build cities along the coastline so that I can establish better control around my my coastal regions, just to have better utilization of that, and down the line potential for future local governors when you utilize those cities, right? As I move my capital from Ormus eastward, then a place like Altis or Gwadar would be potential area for a city and a local governor as well. And then I finally, the nation that I vassalized and then accidentally released, I finally got the Casus Belli against them. Once I started to integrate some of my land, and integrate some of the vassals here in the Saudi Arabian, Persian Gulf area, easy enough war, right? They only have a couple of levies that they're able to raise, and between myself and my vassal, quickly go to war with them. But now I'm looking to start to make that trek around a gulf so that I can have free reign at consolidating my troops without the use of boats, as I said. So this is like the first pass, right? Remaking them a vassal, and start that push around the coast to breaking the alliance eventually with my ally, and the ability to kind of utilize those territories a little bit more economically, more strategically from the point of this game. And you can see that there's still some disloyal vassals that you have to kind of improve opinions, but you can create more subjects. Fiefdoms and vassals will usually like to rotate between the two. And then my next war is kind of in that Kuwait area right there. Easy enough. They didn't have any allies. I'm surprised that the Injuids didn't attack them. But again, it allows me to get a little bit closer to connecting my land. Quick enough war though. And you can see there the control. I still have Ormus as my capital, right? That's a city or a town, I think, that gets to 78, but you don't get control that stretches from your capital, because you start off more focused on land versus naval, and you don't have kind of docks everywhere yet. So it's not really a valuable place to have from a capital perspective, even though at the start it is valuable from a trade perspective. But better as a trade governor or trade city than it being the capital of your country. And all of Persia isn't really the best areas for capital, just because of the terrain that limits how far you can exude control. So I'm hoping in a new patch they kind of get like Austria, where you can kind of push your control through mountain regions more effectively, just to kind of give them more of a buff or a reason to form Persia down the line. But now I'm at war with my old ally Injuids, with the sole intention to feed back land to my vassal, that one territory vassal, give them that whole province, so that they can kind of convert all of that land, and then connect my border, right, for this first war with them, right? Capture all that land, which is in proper Persian territory, and then it allows me to kind of consolidate my region. As you can see, they have about 13k stack, but between myself and them, and my vassals, I should say, as long as they're kind of attached to me, not really into danger. Sometimes they kind of go off and do their own thing, even though I have them under supported. So I'm hoping some of that is fixed too, right? When you do supported, they don't kind of go off and siege things on their own, and they just kind of sit and wait, which would be ideal, right? They just kind of sit near where I'm sieging things down and support a battle. Don't go off and get yourself killed. So yeah, so kind of always playing on, do you leave them on supportive? I need them in this war just because sometimes they can be outnumbered, but they do stupid things, especially when they get they get war score for just wiping out a 2,000 stack vassal army. But at the end of the day, eventually worn them down enough, sieged enough of the forts that they had to get the territories they want, create a couple more vassals that have my culture, so it's a little bit easier to then integrate them down the line where I don't need to do that trick of converting them. Following that war, I'm at war again. I strategically kind of go into wars with Mihrabids, which is kind of in the Persian mountains there. I don't intend to really take any land, but they do have some of my immediate neighbors as allies. And my allies have much stronger neighbors to like the north and west of me that had combined more levies than I can kind of bring forward with my vassals. I also had Qom as an ally who would get called against me into the war. So it's a strategic way to kind of take land from these territories, break their alliances down the line. So maximize that like approach where I can kind of take land from my enemies at the conclusion of that war, right? So they're more than happy to give up their their allies' territories if I'm not taking theirs, and I take 100% war score. So it's sometimes a strategic way to get into a war to take land that you want, right? Versus like going against a number of allies that are going to be much stronger, and then you can kind of break those alliances. So the next war, it's a little bit easier to take clay from them, especially if they lose an alliance and then become a lot weaker. Then that country might not longer be willing to ally them down the road, right? Because you see that yourself, where it's like you're not strong enough to be an ally. So sometimes you can kind of break that, and then they're a little bit easier pickings in the next war because they can't get strong allies if they themselves are much weaker. So you're always kind of looking for unique ways into desirable wars. Injuids has a lot of land that is, the territories that I'm looking for. Shiraz right there is a pretty valuable city, which will eventually become my capital once I kind of integrate that down the line. Eventually becomes my capital. It has a lot stronger RGO surrounding it than Ormus, and has the ability to kind of build roads. All of Persia isn't really the best from a capital perspective. It's probably better to move more towards the Crescent and Anatolia for better land, but just mainly because there's not a lot of grassland in the area, right, where you can kind of expand control quickly. Hopefully down the line, Persia and the Persian nations get a little bit of a buff to allow you to establish better control throughout the mountains as a Persian nation. Similar to like what they're doing with Austria. I'm sure that's going to be an approach for all of these nations to give you a reason to play some of these nations versus just having territory, and like the only way to kind of be strong as a nation is to have a capital outside of Persia, right? Like I was playing it kind of like a role playing where I didn't want to have a capital in the Crescent or in India, right? Those are kind of like the two strategies of like Generalist Gaming kind of has a good video on the best capital regions in the Persian area, and basically his suggestion is just like move out of Persia. So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to stay in Persia, continue to kind of push my boundaries. I've already kind of established that coastal region of the Persian Gulf, but pushing inward, only taking the land that I desire. So I'm pushing up closer and closer. I'm allied to Qom. I'll eventually have to kind of break that alliance, but I can use them to kind of have some of these immediate wars. They actually call me into some future wars as well, so making sure that if there is land that you desire, it's sieging it down before they do. So you're always kind of playing that game as it is, right? Continuing to rinse and repeat, take territory, create some vassals, start to integrate other vassals as you're building new ones, because you do need a number of territories in order to form Persia, like over 200. So I'm not quite there yet. I still have quite a bit of expansion to do before I can actually do that. But here, the Mihrabids was the reason I got into war. I don't intend to take any of that land anyway, just because passing through the mountains is kind of useless. So I just kind of piece them out with humiliation and cash to spam levies and live to fight another day. So it's now into the 1514 now. I utilize the CBs that I have, right? The shackle CB or the defeat enemy CB if we're both rival to each other. At least they have it from, you can just kind of use a CB to spy on them and then create that versus having to waste like a parliament action. So enough of an easy enough way to get into wars with a lot of my neighboring territories. I'm much stronger, so I can't really rival them anymore. But the intention is to capture all the Persian land, especially if it's an ally that's I have desirable territory. So it's just making sure they don't kind of siege behind me, break up their smaller stacks, unsiege any kind of provinces, and continue to push into proper Persian territory, right? Again, they have pretty decent sized stacks here, but not substantial enough where I can't take them on with just half of my levies, right? So I'm just kind of continuously moving with half my stacks, kind of sieging down forts, supporting wars, making sure that my vassals, as you can see I kind of lost that one right there, but make sure my vassals attached to me so that they're not kind of going off and doing their own thing and getting themselves killed, which is always a fun strategy, right? Like, even though if you put them on supportive, the only thing that will keep them in their territory is like passive or defensive, but that doesn't really help me either, right? Where they're just kind of staying there. Like, I really just want them to either attach to me when I'm sieging a fort or stay really close to me so that when I do get attacked by a stack, they just kind of support that versus going and sieging a fort by themselves and then like just getting themselves killed, which is invaluable for me and leads to diminished war score potentially, right? But luckily enough, this isn't a war that I'm like sweating, and by any stretch of the imagination, I'm much stronger than all of these nations, so I'm able to siege things down, completely annex that nation just there to my north, and then finish off the war with the Injuids to kind of take down as much of their land as possible, making sure to kind of block off Combe from borders with them so that they don't take it in a future war as well. So another war done. We're getting into the 1520s. As you can see there, like the Forum Persia region, right, a tier 4 nation. I only have 137 territories. You need 242. But once I annex all my vassals, I'll be probably closer to about 200. So I'm not that far away. It's just, obviously annexing all the vassals is going to take a couple of decades in and of itself. And right here, the Qualm kind of caused me into a war. Iduids is already being sieged down, so my strategy was to kind of just sit on all of their provinces once that war kind of ends, because they're kind of a co-belligerent in another war. So I had my troops already in the territories to kind of siege down all of the provinces, making sure I don't get caught, which I almost did right there with a huge stack where I actually did get caught. But if I siege down all the territory, then Qualm can't themselves, and I can do a separate piece and kind of block them from blobbing, because they're not going to take territory that's unconnected towards their lands. They might take a vassal, but I think they have too much territory to actually make Injuins into a vassal anyway. So it's easy enough war. As you can see, I kind of took the land. Qualm themselves kind of took only a couple of provinces versus what they could have, which is blobbed a lot further. So it's always a game of kind of maximizing your advantage and preventing even your allies from expanding into land, especially if you desire that land yourself. It's just kind of sitting on and ensuring that you can kind of take all of the territories, take all the forts, making sure that you have the desirable peace treaty or even separate piecing from them with out pissing off your alliance. I eventually am going to break the alliance with Qom, or they with me, as we share more of the borders. But we're frenemies as it is, and I don't want them to take any territory when I desire the land. I also don't want them to give me non-Persian land in the peace treaty. So if I siege down between them and their allies enough of the land, I can kind of blob and suppress them from potentially potentially taking a lot of this clay, right? So all of this land is right now being sieged by myself. I control all of the territory, so they can't act the territories themselves. So they're waiting for some of these forts to kind of siege down so that they can get enough of a war score. The only land they can take is those like 2 territories that are on their immediate border. So it's really timing it. I'm obviously moving this fast from like a playthrough perspective, but you have to kind of take it slow. As soon as you siege down a fort, are they willing to accept? Because if they accept a peace deal, right, then you might only get 1 territory. So here I am. I'm just trying to blob, trying to disconnect them from the land, so that even when I see upper peace, they have to re-siege all this land down themselves. And then if they're not like immediately connected, then they don't really kind of desire to expand further. So there's only like those 3 territories that they can even physically expand to, which is just kind of territory I'll have to take down the line anyway. So again, it's an easy enough strategy to kind of block your ally from taking the territory you want, especially when you require it to form Persia. Right now I'm almost at 170, so I probably have enough if I just annex all my vassals, but what the fun is just kind of waiting for that to happen. So let me push the envelope myself, gain start to go to war with my old enemy, my old allies, and start to go to war with new countries, right? To Qom is a frenemy, as we said before, and I've built enough to break that alliance and start to go to war with them down the line. But still, I tell them now, they call me into a second war here. This will be my last war with them, but same strategy as before, right? Siege down everything by the Chobanids. I think they're at war with a couple of nations here, but Chobanids is the only one that has territories in Persia. So if I can get to all of the Persian territories first, get it all, separate peace out, break the alliance with the Qom, and then I'll eventually go to war with Qom to get the remainder of the territories that I need from a Persian perspective. So between myself and my vassals, I've sieged down all of the land myself. I think they're sitting on a castle. We're chasing down their enemies to like defeat them, whereas I just kind of prioritized getting all of the territory myself, and then kind of blobbing enough so that they can expand into territories. They actually don't have any of the bordering territory. I think they got 1 right there that I was not able to get to in time. But again, not much of a big deal. I intend to kind of go to war with them anyway, so they can take that for all they want, and then it'll be mine down the line anyway. So, get this out, peace out before they do, so that I control the peace treaty, and I'm not just kind of wasting my time in a war for like 1 province and kicking the can down for another decade. But get enough war score once I siege down enough of the castles. Took all of the provinces, to maximize my war score that they're willing to kind of concede, and I've started to kind of snowball my economy a little bit here. So it's building up a decent kind of nest egg, building enough cities in and around the Persian area. Started to build some governors as well, to expand east and westward and around the Persian Gulf. And I'm, almost at the time where I can start to form Persia. Right, I have a couple of provinces left. I could probably get there just by annexing all my vassals remaining there into the Persian mountains, but what fun is just kind of waiting another 20 years just vassalizing one. Let's take on Qom. Well, I'm overpowered then, and rightful Persian clay that is rightfully mine, right? So we were allies, similar to the Indruids, but that's only as good as their value to me is. So they have a couple vassals themselves, but nothing too substantial, right? I've been meticulous on how I expanded in this campaign, not too aggressively, so no coalitions really ever formed, except for at the beginning when they were guaranteeing my vassals because I culture converted them. But it was slow enough, fun enough from a campaign perspective that I was able to expand quickly, right? At the conclusion of this campaign, I'll have enough provinces and territories to form, the 242 directly under my control to form Persia. And then once you form Persia, you can kind of release territories if you don't wish to integrate them yourselves. But I wasn't really looking to expand on this campaign any further, right? I accomplished my goal, forming Persia, surrounding the Persian Gulf from a coastal region perspective. So I did all of that. I can push further. Probably if I were to play through further along with this campaign, I would, consolidate all of proper Persia and potentially expand into the Crescent and Anatolia and Caucasus, and also into India, right? As I gain more local governors through tech. But I thought, from a goal perspective, a completion perspective, especially as the patch is having updates slowly but surely, it was just more about completing this campaign. I had this all kind of recorded last week, and just finally got around to editing it along with the more recent Serbian campaign. So I'm looking for ideas and opportunities. I haven't recorded anything so far for the next series of campaigns, so I'm looking out to the community itself, right? Is there areas that you'd like to see from me to explore further, new challenges to have, right? I click this button and become Persia. I have this great green blob now, and comes to a conclusion of this campaign. But if you like this video, if you want to see more like this, please do follow along and subscribe. Give me some comments as well. It helps the channel kind of grow a little bit more, right? I'm doing this for fun. Certainly not intending to become a huge creative, but I like playing this. I like kind of learning a little bit too from the game perspective. It's a fun to kind of create some of these scenarios, and I really like the game. I like what they've done from a patch perspective. So hopefully once they kind of finalize the beta and make it more official in the next week or two, there'll be some updates with some of the bugs, but all in all, I think there's been some positive changes that have happened. Sometimes they overcorrect, but I think they course correct quickly enough. Especially since the release of the game in only November, right? There's a number of Paradox games that were poor at the start and like nothing was fixed for over a year, but I think Johan and team really want to make those improvements and value community input. So it's interesting to kind of see where they kind of build out flavors and missions and things like that, as we get a little bit further along from the release of the campaign. But hope everyone enjoyed the Persia or the Ormus to Persia campaign, and thanks again everyone for watching. Take care.